like that. And I will just go through a brief introduction, and then Connecticut DOT will hop in. But I just wanted to welcome and also thank everyone for their participation on this PAC, our Project Advisory Committee. This will be a continuation of our last 2 PAC meetings. So consider it, you know, a continuation of that discussion from our last meeting and our meetings before. As I've asked, please just add your name to the chat as you join so that we can take attendance. And that way, we will provide an opportunity for those who are using phone solely to access this presentation at an opportunity to introduce themselves at a different time or a later time so that we can record everyone's attendance. I do want to note that this meeting is being recorded, so if anyone chooses to turn on your camera, we will consider that as your consent to using your video and the recording. I also do want to ask that everyone mute themselves upon arrival and remain muted until the conversational portion of the presentation begins. And I will alert you to those portions. And just to go over Zoom, we are using the Zoom application for this meeting. Zoom has many features that are available for you to use. Within the reactions pane of Zoom, you will be able to raise your hands if you have any questions, and for times I may ask for your interactions. There's also the chat where you can insert your comments via text at any point in time during this presentation. I also want to note that there are polls that will periodically come up as well, and your participation is important in those polls so that we can get that input from your UPAC members. And right now I'll turn things over to the DOT so that they can provide a brief introduction to this meeting.
Okay, thanks, Naomi. Again, my name is Neil Patel. I'm with the Department of Transportation, Principal Engineer for the Pneumic program. So again, good afternoon, and thanks for joining us again, taking time out of your schedule to meet with us, especially for this very important project. We understand how everybody's schedules are fairly busy, so I just want to take just a brief minute here to kind of address some of the questions and concerns that we received this morning via email. Again, we welcome feedback and encourage open dialogue. That's part of this process. We want to ensure that all the PAC members are informed and we as a team are listening. There is a lot of information to digest in these PAC meetings in a short time frame, and we'll continue to explain the process and clarify aspects of it. But again, yeah, we want to keep that open dialogue, and remember, this is a collaboration. So as you will see, and as part of, I think Naomi had sent out a PDF of the presentation, some of the questions and concerns are going to be answered during this presentation. We did go back and restructure our agenda as we were preparing for this meeting based on the concerns that we heard at the previous meeting. So I think one of the first things that we are going to be addressing is purpose and need, clarifying that in our goals and objectives going forward. We are going to be talking about the PAC meetings and the frequency and the length, so that we can gauge some feedback from all of you, and we can certainly talk about format. But I just wanted to emphasize we do have a structured presentation. It has, as Naomi mentioned, poll questions. It has times where we can have discussion. We would like to get through that structured presentation. As you will see, some of those concerns will be addressed in the presentation, but we will also address anything else that that we need to address at the end of the meeting. And so with that, I will turn it back over to Naomi, I believe.
Yep. Great. Thank you, Neil. So we'll just move on and get into the agenda today. So today we will,
Naomi,
as mentioned, yeah.
I hate to interrupt. I just want to make a comment. This is Eric Hazelton with the Housatonic Valley Association, and thank Neil for addressing that and just taking the moment to say something. You did mention that there will be an opportunity to cover some of them. Is there a way to let us know now which ones aren't in that we might be able to spend 5 minutes on talking about? And just to clarify on the list that was sent, I wanted to just, say that I was one who sent the list, and we just want to understand the process, and we also want to be understood throughout the process. And that's the corner and the angle we're coming from. So we appreciate any time we can spend addressing any of the anything on that list. I understand we sent it yesterday, but yeah, thank you for that.
Yeah, I think that's, we just received it this morning and we're going through it and as we prepare for the meeting, but you'll see as we go through, we will be addressing some of those points and there are some that are, fairly, self-explanatory. I think there's one of the documents that you were asking for is available on our website. But we wanted to kind of get through the presentation and then, have that open discussion at the end of the meeting. And again, thank you for the feedback. I think part of it is as we'll get through this presentation and as we have that open discussion is, yeah, we would welcome those questions and concerns, maybe even right after a PAC meeting, so we have time to prepare going forward into the next meeting. So again, thanks.
Yeah, and just to add to that, Eric, Scott Roberts with DOT, just so there's no misunderstanding, we're going to cover everything that was on your list, right? So it's not some of them. I think what Neil's saying is during the presentation, you're going to see some of those things will be answered because we had already planned to continue the discussion from the end of the last meeting. But, we do at the end of this meeting, we'll go through that list and make sure all your concerns and questions are addressed. That helps.
Thank you, Scott and Neil. Yeah, I'll bring up any questions we don't hear towards the end, and looking forward to the discussion period.
Sure.
Great, thank you. Okay, so as mentioned in today's meeting, we will review PAC meeting 2B. So we will continue the discussion on the preliminary purpose and needs statement. We will highlight the revisions that have resulted from the PAC and stakeholder input thus far. We will also go over the other transportation-related goals and objectives that your perspective has helped shape. And we will also review the PAC perspective results, so the results of the input we received at the last meeting. And then finally, we'll go through the next steps, and then we'll open up the floor to any questions, comments, concerns, and during that section, we'll also address those questions in that email we received. And I do want to note opportunities to provide comments and ask questions will occur throughout this presentation. As always, I want everyone to feel comfortable, feel free to utilize that chat function or raise your hand at any point in time during this presentation. If you don't want to chat with the entire group, you can send myself or anyone on the program team a chat on the side so that not everyone can see it. But I do want to mention that there will be opportunities for discussion. If you do have a question or a comment, I want to make sure I get to a good stopping point so that we can address those questions or comments. So this is the leadership team for the Pneumic program. We have gone through introductions before, so I just want to breeze through this really quickly, and we'll move forward with this. And as presented at our other meetings, these are the organizations that we've invited to be part of the Pneumic PAC. At this time, I will ask that those of you who are joining from a telephone to briefly introduce yourselves and the organization or community that you represent. I will identify you by the last 4 numbers of your phone number, just so that we don't have multiple people talking. And then all others who are returning, please just insert your names and affiliations into the chat box so that we can make a record of your attendance. So I see one phone caller, and those last 4 numbers are 7479.
Yes, Martin Spring, Waterville Community Club.
Great. Hi, Martin. Thank you for joining us today.
You're welcome.
Great. Okay. All right, moving on. So to recap, since our last meeting, PAC members have been providing input on the Pneumic program's Pell study. You all have been checking your email for information about the program. And on the other side, the program team, we have been obtaining that input from PAC members, stakeholders, and the public. We have been refining that preliminary purpose and need statement and identifying those other transportation-related goals and objectives. And we have also been developing the universe of alternatives and the screening criteria for the Pell study. So PAC meeting to be recapped. Last meeting, we met January 26th. We held that via Zoom. We had 30 attendees representing 20 organizations, which is roughly average for these PAC meetings. We've had approximately 35% response to those comic exercise cards that I sent out, and about 66% response to the polling questions that were provided during the meeting, which we believe is pretty successful for participation in our program at this point in time. As mentioned, we will continue the discussion, provide an additional opportunity for EPAC members to provide input and to develop a better understanding of these foundational elements for our Pneumic Health Studies program. We have, thus far, the PAC meetings have been occurring on a regular basis. We have added and extended meetings in order to better manage the dissemination of information, and that will help in the success of this early planning process. In order to continue to have an engaging and productive discussion, the program team is reviewing the commitment that the PAC is to the PAC members. And with that, I would like to launch a poll with 2 questions, and I want you all to provide your feedback on these questions. This poll will help us better manage the PAC meetings in the future. To date, we've been meeting essentially on a monthly basis, and that was to help develop as well as explain the Pell study milestones, as well as those other aspects of the Pell. It is very important that we maintain the quorum that we've developed with each other, and as well as your input and participation, which is critical for the success of our Pell study. See that people are responding to the poll, which is great. Please select the option that best represents your preference. We do intend to maintain our schedule of the Pell to retain the progress that we have made. Once you've made your selection, just make sure you hit that submit button so that your answers can be recorded. I will leave this poll up for a few more slides so that you can have more time to answer your questions and provide your answers. I'm going to move forward on a couple of slides, but this poll will remain open for a few more minutes. So this familiar figure on your screen, this depicts the anticipated steps in our full Pell process. As noted, we are in that develop the purpose and need and the goals and objectives milestone of the study for today's meeting. And you know, that was also what was presented at the last meeting. At the last few previous meetings, we reviewed the existing conditions and the anticipated future outcomes. We've identified the transportation needs and the deficiencies of the mixed master interchange. We've also identified, you know, key community and environmental features that are important to Waterbury, the surrounding area and the region. And we've developed our draft preliminary purpose and needs statement, taking all those conditions into consideration to formulate that statement. So with all of this, we have been discussing, you know, how the DOT is intending to find a solution for the future of the mixed master interchange. We have discussed this as being a PEL process. PEL stands for planning and environmental linkages. We're linking the planning portion to the environmental portion of this process in this very early stage. So the PEL study process for identifying a reasonable solution for the mixed master interchange works like a funnel displayed on the screen. The process began with an analysis of the existing study area to identify those needs and deficiencies, and to help shape that preliminary purpose and needs statement and those transportation-related goals and objectives. We also use that information to identify a universe of alternatives, which we are still refining. All those items get collected into a funnel where those alternatives will be evaluated and screened through 3 levels of analysis. Each level will become increasingly more detailed, and will ultimately result in the identification of a PEL recommendations or a range of reasonable alternatives is what we're calling it. Whatever is left over in this portion of this funnel will be moved forward into our NEPA phase, or our subsequent environmental phase for the program. So today we are focusing on these items. Since our last meeting, I do want to reiterate that the program team has revised the preliminary purpose and needs statement, and we will be providing you that revised statement this morning, or at this meeting, sorry. In this portion, we'll go over that preliminary purpose and needs statement. We'll review some of those purpose and need aspects, and then also the other transportation-related goals and objectives that we have identified. So this is a refresher of what is a purpose and needs statement. The purpose and needs statement is essentially the foundation of NEPA, the National Environmental Policy Act. It's also the foundation of that decision-making process. Typically, purpose and needs statements are associated with the NEPA process, and the purpose and need is a concise and well-defined statement of why the project is being proposed and what those underlying transportation issues and deficiencies are. The purpose and need is key to establishing that basis for the development of a range of reasonable alternatives that's required for a NEPA evaluation. A purpose and need assists in the identification and the eventual selection of a preferred alternative. I would like to mention that we are in this very early conceptual planning phase. So while PEL is considered to be pre-NEPA, we are using NEPA-like terminology. And I do want to note that there is a strategy for this, because a thoughtful purpose and need statement developed during this early PEL study will increase the relevance of the information that's developed now into the subsequent NEPA phase. And this will allow us to focus the NEPA study in a similar way that a purpose and need is focused in the NEPA process. So at the last meeting, I introduced to you the concept of and components of a purpose and need statement. A purpose and need is comprised of 3 parts. We have our purpose, needs, and goals and objectives. The purpose states why the program is being proposed. The needs identify the major transportation deficiencies, and it also includes factual and quantifiable data to back up those identified deficiencies. And then it also includes program goals and objectives. Those identifies the intended outcomes to be met as a result of the program. Provide some further background, guidance developed and coordinated with the Federal Highway Administration and the Center for Environmental Excellence states that non-transportation related issues or goals that are exclusively desirable are not to be included in that purpose and deed statement. Those goals that are not a transportation problem or unsatisfactory, deficient condition of the transportation system are discouraged from incorporation into a purpose statement. I do want to highlight that, however, in achieving any of those other goals and objectives that may be a desirable outcome of the program can be incorporated into the statement in a different manner. We will go through those other goals and objectives identified for the Pneumic program later in the presentation, but I'm just providing a little bit more background. So these other transportation-related goals and objectives are considered when evaluating potential transportation solutions. They have been developed with reference to federal and state legislation. And so those boxes that have appeared on the side of your screen, these are just a few of the guiding regulations and legislations referenced for and referenced into our PEL study for future inclusion in our subsequent study phase. This federal guidance states that the identified and incorporated other transportation-related goals and objectives should balance those environmental, transportation, and other values. These other goals and objectives should also acknowledge interagency coordination to support environmental stewardship, program streamlining, and program delivery. These other transportation-related goals and objectives are considered when evaluating potential transportation solutions. This occurs both during our PEL study process and then further developed during our NEPA phase, which happens after our PEL study. These regulations offer direction for the planning study, which will ultimately become the program. The legislation helps us to develop a strong and solid foundation for our future process. But one bit of legislation that we consistently identify and reference is the NEPA legislation. And I'd like to explain that a little bit more. So what is NEPA? We have touched upon this briefly in previous meetings, but to provide a slightly more detailed explanation, the NEPA process is often described as an umbrella. And under that umbrella, all applicable environmental laws, executive orders, and regulations are considered and addressed prior to the final project decision and document approval. So the regulations identified under this NEPA umbrella on your screen are only a portion of the laws. NEPA incorporates many more as applicable to a project or a program. Conclusion of the NEPA process results with a decision that addresses multiple concerns and requirements. The Federal Highway Administration's NEPA process allows for transportation officials to make project decisions that balance the engineering and transportation needs with social, economic, and natural environmental factors. During the process, a wide range of partners, including the public, businesses, other interest groups, and agencies at all levels of government provide their input into the project and environmental decisions. So with that said, the consideration of environmental impacts, alternative approaches to achieving a transportation goal, and the evaluation of possible mitigation measures is looked at in much more detail once a design alternative has been selected, which is performed under this NEPA umbrella. But I want to say, like, as I mentioned, the PEL study, the planning and environmental linkages study, is considered to be pre-NEPA. The information developed and evaluated during the PEL study phase will be utilized to inform our NEPA process, in a much more pointed manner once the NEPA process begins. The PEL study does include the consideration of environmental impacts that includes those alternative approaches to achieving those transportation requirements and, you know, the evaluation of possible mitigation measures. But I do want to note that, you know, since our PEL study occurs during this very early conceptual planning phase, these environmental evaluations must also be very high level and at this conceptual stage as well. I will stop here for a moment to see if there are any questions before we move on.
Eric Hazelton here. Quick question. Is there a separate mission statement that, or a purpose and need statement that is in NEPA, or is this going to be what is utilized throughout the NEPA process, this exact phrasing of the purpose and need statement?
Yeah, no, that's a really great question, Eric. So the purpose and need statement that we're developing now is considered the PEL study preliminary purpose and need statement. The statement can be more refined and changed as it moves into the NEPA phase. So it's not necessarily going to be the statement that is utilized during the NEPA phase. Right now, we are very, very early in our study phase, and so there may be things that come about as our design develops a little bit further, so that we can see some of these other alignments or other things that may influence potential solutions for our transportation needs. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, thank you.
Okay, great. Thank you. And okay, I'm going to move on since I have not seen any other questions. So as I mentioned, we are in this early conceptual planning phase, which is the pre-NEPA phase. And I did mention briefly that to distinguish between these two phases, we are calling this Pneumic PEL study purpose need a preliminary purpose and need. So this purpose and need that is thoughtful and developed during this PEL study, it will increase the relevance of the information that we develop now for the information that will be developed during NEPA. We have identified these three purpose and need parts for the preliminary purpose and need statement. On the left of the screen in this table, we have the needs or those major transportation deficiencies. These have been identified as structural, geometric, and operational deficiencies, which include congestion. To the right of these needs, we have the purpose of the program. This is why the program is being proposed. And well, the program is being proposed to improve those major transportation deficiencies. That means we're proposing this program to improve the bridge conditions of I-84 and Route 8, to improve the roadway conditions of I-84 and Route 8, and to improve the level of service of I-84 and Route 8 and the local road network associated with the highway system. The bottom of the table identifies the intended outcomes of the proposed transportation improvements, the program goals and objectives. These improvements are expected to improve system performance, reduce congestion, reduce crash rates, maintain critical system linkages in Connecticut and the Northeast, and facilitate connectivity with Waterbury through the local road network, including multimodal travel. As I've mentioned, this purpose and need statement can be further refined to incorporate any new issues or data, so needs identified during this PEL process as we coordinate with stakeholders and public and other agencies. I also want to note that the goals and objectives on the screen, so in that bottom part, are slightly different from the other goals and objectives that I will present after a couple of slides. But I do want to present to you all the changes that we've made to the preliminary purpose and needs statement in our next slide. So the purpose of the Pneumic program is to improve the existing structural, geometric, and operational deficiencies of the I-84 and Route 8 interchange to meet current and future traffic needs. This program is expected to improve system performance, reduce congestion, reduce the crash rate, maintain critical system linkages in Connecticut and the Northeast, and facilitate connectivity with Waterbury through the local road network, including multimodal travel. There have been some refinements since the last time we've met. Those refinements include, I'm going to use the laser pointer so you can see. But prior to this change, instead of improve, we had correct. Changing it to improve allows us to have a little bit more flexibility in finding a solution for those transportation needs in the program area. We've also changed enhanced safety to reduce the crash rate. This was a result of the PAC coordination that we've been doing, as well as the data that we have for the study area. Prior to this change, it was enhanced safety through discussions with agencies and understanding this process a little bit more. These items need to be more measurable. So being able to definitively measure the crash rate, which will improve or enhance safety concerns in the area, is a better way to state and measure those improvements. Another item that we changed was we had previously said facilitate connectivity with downtown Waterbury and remove downtown Waterbury so that we can be more inclusive of all Waterbury, because the highway system does affect more than just the downtown area. And that was also a comment of PAC members that we received last meeting to make sure that we're a little bit more broad and inclusive with our statement here. We're not only facilitating that connectivity with downtown Waterbury, but other areas. And then the last item that we've changed, we're taking out some other words here, which was accommodating and enhancing multimodal travel. We felt that, since these purpose and needs statements need to be more concise, taking out those words allows for this purpose and needs statement to be a little bit more clearer. The statement is connected to the facilitate connectivity here, and so we felt that removing those words wouldn't be detrimental to our program. I'm going to stop here and ask if there are any questions.
Naomi, this is Mark Nielsen and VCOG. One thing that I've been thinking about with this program, and it actually sort of triggered my thought pattern from the new infrastructure bill, is the thought about this project should also work or strive to reconnect some of the neighborhoods that have been split by I-84 and Route 8. So I think that's going to be an important aspect of any kind of improvements is, okay, fine, we can maybe, with a new interchange, improve travel for people who are passing through the area on these big expressways, but we want to make sure that we focus in on reconnecting the neighborhoods within they've been cut off because of the interchange. There's no way anybody can really get from the east side to the west side or north and south without too much they can only do that with difficulty. So somehow reconnecting the neighborhoods might be something we could think about adding.
Thank you, Mark. As we progress through these slides, you will see how we do envision facilitating this connectivity with Waterbury. being able to measure what that means and how potential solutions may be able to facilitate that connectivity is something that we are looking for, and how our highway system impacts those neighborhoods is something that we are looking at. And as we progress a little bit further into the study, you will be able to see how we're measuring some of these items that you are bringing up and incorporating them into our guiding principles of our study, which those guiding principles do influence the study, but they are, they're not technically this purpose statement that you're seeing on the screen.
Yeah. Hello, Naomi. This is Martin Begnell. Just to follow up on Mark's point, and I guess you're kind of answered my question that these kinds of things that Mark is mentioning, the community impact, the neighborhood impact, as well as the others, the environmental impact, the historical impact, these other things that I think the reason why the PAC is here, right? To kind of, you guys can fix the road. We're concerned about what happens around it, right? So those things you're saying don't belong in a purpose and need statement. They will be part of another part of the project statement or goals and objectives kinds of things.
Yeah. So to answer your question, and let me know if I am answering it, these the purpose and need statement will become a report that will be many pages long. Within that report, we'll have our purpose statement, we'll have our need statement, we'll have our program goals, but then we'll also have those other transportation related goals and objectives. Those are all included in that report. So it's not a separate document or in a separate place. They're all included in that report. I will, go through those other transportation related goals and objectives, and those other transportation related goals and objectives will have criteria attached to them, and which you will see later on in this process. And that criteria will help to clarify, how we are measuring potential solutions to our transportation system that incorporate, those community concerns, the environmental concerns, and those other concerns that get associated with the transportation system, albeit, a little bit separate.
I do. I think that answers my question. It's part of the big report, not necessarily in the statement. Are those kinds of goals and objectives going to be worked out with a kind of context-sensitive design program?
Absolutely. Yes,
okay,
absolutely.
I think that's important that we incorporate those principles into this project.
Yeah, you'll see on a couple of the future slides. Well, I'll go through those guiding principles where maintaining a context or creating a solution that is within the context of the community and the environment and concerns of the community is a guiding principle for this health study. So it will influence potential solutions and how they're developed and progressed through this Pell process.
Yeah, I think,
Thank you.
Naomi, just to add to that and to speak to Mark's question in terms of the infrastructure bill, yeah, we're hearing the same thing. And, as we get more information, in terms of the community connectivity is an important aspect of the infrastructure bill going forward. And, even positioning certain types of projects that are ready for it, to apply for grants. So that's something that, we will be looking at as we get more information that comes down from the infrastructure bill. But yeah, and again, just to repeat what Naomi said, I think you'll see in a couple of slides in terms of some of those transportation related, those other related goals and objectives will become apparent.
Thank you.
Naomi, this is Eric, HVA. I support what Mark and Martin said. And one question I have is, when is this purpose and needs statement going to be finalized? When will our PAC comments be, when's the deadline for our comments on it?
Right. So as I mentioned, you know, the purpose and needs can adjust and change as the Pell process develops. The program team and the study team, we do have meetings with agencies coming up. So we will be meeting with DEEP, Federal Highway Administration, the State Historic Preservation Office, to also get their input and insight for this purpose statement and these other transportation-related goals and objectives, to make sure that we are incorporating, you know, their concerns as well into this program as a whole.
Will there be some back and forth on that? Like, will we see comments from the agencies and be able to comment as well, or see what their input is? Will that be public information?
We will document our coordination with those agencies. I will defer to the DOT on whether or not there will be, you know, this back and forth that you are anticipating or wanting on this preliminary purpose and needs statement. Yeah, I'll leave it.
I guess just one other addition to my question. Well, comment is that, you know, a few slides earlier, you said this is one of the most important sections of the environmental document. And so going back to what Mark Nielsen said, I think leaving out connections to communities, or even just some general statement about the environment, is concerning to not have in a mission statement. And
Right.
And so I think being able to find a way to address that, some level of looking outside of the box of transportation, and looking outside of that and incorporating something, I think would be advantageous for the process.
Right, and I want to, you know, I want to clarify this a little bit further. What you're seeing on the screen is not the end of our, you know, purpose and needs statement. Our purpose and needs statement is collectively a report that's full of, you know, several hundred pages of data and information, and which states our purpose statement, our needs statement with that data to back it up, our program goals and objectives, and our other transportation-related goals and objectives. So they're all included in that report, and they're all, you know, identified as that mission statement that I think you, Eric, and other people are identifying as a need to incorporate into the program. So we are incorporating it into our program, into our whole mission statement. It's not going to be part of this, you know, purpose statement or the needs statement, but it's going to be part of our transportation-related goals and objectives statement and our other transportation-related goals and objectives statement, which get packaged into this entire report.
And again, just to, you know, reiterate, you know, the purpose and need, yeah, it's focused on what the current efficiencies are out there, right? And in terms of what the program is gonna be envisioned. So I guess the other part of this is in terms of the goals and objectives, I think it's very similar to some of the other projects. The purpose and need is really serving that transportation related aspect. At the same time, though, we understand that there are other goals and objectives that should be part of the program. And that's where I think, you know, some of the concerns and are going to be apparent in terms of that's where we can address some of those questions and concerns that you guys have in terms of the environment. Because we have to do that on all of our projects in terms of understanding the impacts to the environment. And then to add to that, the purpose and need, it's really not finalized until you get into that NEPA phase, as you get into that document. And so again, we're just in the PEL phase, the planning and environmental linkage phase.
I would just add to that, maybe just to clarify a little bit too, Eric, that, you know, again, this purpose and needs statement, this statement that you're seeing here on the screen right now is, as Neil said, to define the transportation to define and provide a measurable, something to measure against for the transportation initiative, right? So again, the other stuff that you don't necessarily see a word here that says environmental or, I'm trying to think of some of the other things, but, we don't list all of those to define the transportation initiative, the transportation project, right? But as we also said, all of our projects, everything that we do under the federal aid umbrella comes under the NEPA requirements, right? So everything is run through the complete ringer in terms of all those various acts and things that Naomi listed on the earlier slide, the Clean Water Act, the Clean Air Act, the historic preservation, all of those things, everything gets considered and everything is ultimately addressed in the final product. So it's not that any of these things are being ignored, it's just that this is the way this particular statement is defined, right? And that's, I don't know if that helps, hopefully.
This is Kevin Zach. To your point, Scott, forgive me for my naiveness. Is there a reason why those elements can't be included or are not included? Meaning you said everything's going to be incorporated in the 10,000 page document that's finalized in this process. But what's the harm in putting environmental and community connection will be addressed, or some wording? I'm confused that I understand you're saying it's going to be in there, but I'm also confused at why a sentence can't be placed in there. Is there a reason for that?
Yeah, well, sort of. So let me see if I can explain a little bit. So as I said, this statement, when it is final, will help determine the selected alternative, right? So we have to be able to come back to this and measure against it to remove various, we start out, as Naomi said, we start out with a big universe of alternatives, right? We're trying to narrow those down now through this PEL process, and then we'll narrow them down even further through the NEPA process. This PEL process will get us to what we call a reasonable range of alternatives. You don't know what that is yet, but let's call it a handful, right? And then we run those through the more rigorous NEPA ringer to get to a final selected alternative and a record of decision, right? So we don't generally put things into the purpose and need statement that we won't be able to quantify or measure. Does that make sense? Like all of these things, the structural, the geometric, the operational deficiencies, we can measure an outcome for those, right? But we try not to put things that are harder to quantify because it makes it that much more difficult when you go through the process to either eliminate alternatives or not eliminate them, because you don't want to end up at the end where everything meets your statement or everything doesn't meet your statement. Does that make sense?
The only problem, you said that this can be adjusted as you go, and
right.
And so I guess what I don't understand is that you start off with the whole bundle and you weed out from there. If you start off with a smaller basket, you can't put more in it because it falls out. But if you start off with a larger basket, you have everything in it, and you want to rearrange it, or that rotten fruit, is going to spoil the whole bunch, you take it out. So you start with a bigger pot. If the pot's too small to begin with, how can you add to the pot? I understand I think your answer, or what I understand from your answers, are that we will include it in the wording in the, thousands of pages, but we won't include it because we don't want to take it out later in this statement, correct?
Well, I think the bigger message is that it's included, as Naomi said, in the overall goals and objectives, right? So there's kind of two different things going on here. And certainly these are goals and objectives, like, community connectivity and things like that. But in terms of rebuilding I-84 and Route 8 and the connections therein, right?
So they're
It's
really
not-
not as important. They're not as important as the structure itself. So we got to make sure the structure is correct. And then if we get some community improvements, then that's a bonus, is what you're trying to say.
Yeah.
I'm a slow stuff, like I
think the primary purpose is to address the structure and the geometric and the operations.
Understood.
That is
That's the
purpose.
transportation. Yeah, and that's the transportation initiative, right? And then and again, I don't mean to put like primary, secondary in order of importance, but the secondary goals of the overall improvement are, all of the other stuff.
And it's not to say, right? It's not to say they're going to be discounted, right? When you get to the universe of alternatives, I think you can see that.
No. Understood. I think
what you plenty of alternatives there, and then as you go through that evaluation process.
I think if I may, I think what you're going to find is that, this structure has been built and dissected and divided the city north, south, east, and west. I think the public is interested if this is a process, and a very expensive process and a long-term process, how can we do the very best to reconnect some of those things that have been lost? And what I'm guessing is that, we just got to fix some of the roads and the bridges there, and if we get some extra benefits, that'd be great. But I get the point that you need to fix the place physically first, but you can't discount that the fact that originally this structure really has been detrimental in many ways to the whole city of Waterbury and the surrounding towns. So I think some of us here will, are really interested in trying to make an impact, trying to improve those things that are not included in this statement. And we understand that, the engineers need to move forward with these things. So I guess it's you have to ask yourself, why are some of these stakeholders here? We're not engineers. We're not doing traffic studies. I'm sure you've taken care of those things very well and will continue to. I think from where I sit, I see some serious environmental issues with that, polluting the surrounding area, and disconnected communities. And we're trying to, maybe claw back a little bit of that. And I think that's where our concerns are. So I get the conflict. I get the conflict.
I want to follow up on Kevin's point. It's that other stuff, right, that they mentioned, the other stuff that's important to us, right? I mean, again, you guys can fix the road. I'm eminently confident that you guys know how to fix the road and make it better for transportation, the operational efficiencies and move traffic and all that. We're concerned about everything else. That's why we're here, right? To be concerned about the safety in the community, the pollution, the environment. And Scott, to your point, I think some of those things are measurable, right? Air quality is measurable. Pollution into the river is measurable. Accidents on ancillary roads, that's also measurable. Quality of life is maybe a little more sketchy, but those things can be measured. And we know you know how to do it. So
Yeah.
we want those things fixed as well, not just the road.
I'd like to acknowledge that we are, as you said, Martin, those are the other goals that have been identified by members of the community that we want to incorporate into our program and into our study. And we are incorporating them into our program, into our study as another, goal and objective of finding a solution to the mixed master interchange. Thousands of people use this interchange every single day. We need to make sure that those people can still access this major transportation system for I-84 and Route 8, and we need to maintain that. We need to improve those structural conditions so that it's safe for people to travel on, and we do not negatively impact those commuters so that they can use those systems. We want to be able to find a solution for a lot of these issues, but we also need to be able to figure out what those solutions could be. And then we need to also figure out how we can incorporate these other community goals and objectives into our program so that we have a solution that is supported not only by the DOT, but also by members of the community. And that is really, the purpose of these PAC meetings, so that we can have these discussions and develop this understanding of how this program, this transportation program, can have its goals and objectives, and also include the goals and objectives of the community. As we go through this presentation, you will see how we are incorporating those other measurable goals and objectives that are aside from our transportation deficiencies. As we move forward in our health process, we are going to discuss how we can measure and how we will measure during this very early conceptual phase. If we were to get down to those details that many of you really want, we wouldn't be able to do it at this point in time because we just don't have those solutions yet, and we aren't able to create or measure those solutions yet because we need to develop our need to do this preliminary design and get our design to a certain level in order to be able to measure and incorporate some of those aspects into the program at this moment. But I do want to say that we are incorporating those community goals and those environmental goals. We do have a plan for measuring air quality criteria and noise criteria, which would be identifying, sensitive noise receptors, for an example, or identifying where noise walls could be installed. But we just don't have a solution for those transportation needs yet, and therefore we can't identify them quite yet. They're going to be identified in the program as this program progresses. They are not cast aside. They are part of this purpose and need statement report. They get captured and they're used to guide our study and our program. Let me know if that doesn't answer your question. We do have a couple more slides that do get into that connectivity aspect and those neighborhood connections aspects of the purpose and need statement, other goals and objectives. I want to make sure that we are able to get to that so that you all can have a better understanding of how we are incorporating those into our study and our program at this stage. So we are incorporating them at this stage. You just aren't seeing it in the statement, but you will see it in these other slides, which is incorporated into our report, our purpose and need statement report.
So Naomi, you're saying that you don't have the information yet, and it's got to be developed by engineers in order to respond to some of these questions. at what point, I guess, I'm trying to learn the process. Isn't it better to talk or ask the question first and give it to the engineers and they see if they can incorporate it? Or is it once the engineers have really come up with their design and they're, say if they don't put a sound barrier where they maybe should, you know, is it almost like, is it too late, or is it very easy for us to offer the suggestion to correct that problem? And I agree with that a lot of these things can be measured, like you know, direct flow of, you know, like even spill containment. You know, when there's a hazardous waste spill on that thing, that's going right into the PFAS. If they have to put out a fire on a truck or a car, it's going right into the river. There's no protections whatsoever. Those are very measurable. There, I mean, you know how many sculpers and drains and everything else that are going into that, from that bridge into the river and into the nearby waterways and then into the river. I mean, those are very, very measurable things. And when do we impact that? At what point?
So again, just to speak to that, Kevin, or to hopefully maybe.
All right.
I'm sorry.
You're doing more presentation slides. I can't stay. I'm gonna have to say I'm sorry. I have to leave. I have to go pick my wife up. She's getting out.
Okay, thank you, Martin.
All right. Thank you, Martin. We'll catch you at the next one. Yes. So again, I mean, I saw somebody pop up in the chat about measuring walking scores and things like that. But again, you know, don't misunderstand when I said it's not that those elements cannot be measured, right? It's that we're trying to measure different options or solutions, as Naomi said, for the transportation network. And if we can't use that as, you know, if we can't use these various components of our screening analysis, if you will, to narrow the focus of that universe of alternatives that I mentioned earlier, right? So we have, say, 20 some odd various alternatives that we will be showing you, and they hopefully will drop off somewhere along the way to narrow that down because it didn't work for some aspect of this. But again, if we include things that either every single option works or every single option fails, we never get to that point where we've achieved our reasonable range. Does that make sense, Kevin? I don't know if I'm more confusing or
well,
because we do have a, you know, in terms of the community connectivity and all that, I mean, we have a whole, you know, urban planning component of this program that we haven't gotten into yet, right? So there is a lot of different things that the urban planners are looking at in terms of promoting, you know, better pedestrian and bicycle access and things like that, and making it more user-friendly under the highway overpasses and things. You know, I mean, obviously you're still going to have a highway that's likely going to be elevated just because of the terrain in the city. You know, you've got I don't know, 200 and something foot elevation differential from one side to the other, and you have to get over the river and over the railroad and things like that. So, you know, there's different things that we're looking at to make the user experience on the street level and the neighborhood level more enjoyable, more attractive. So, you know, but haven't seen all of that yet. So, you know, that's still all in future meetings that we're going to bring all this stuff up.
A lot more information to come that's gonna, I think,
yeah,
you know, clear up some of your.
Understood. Thank you.
Thank you.
I guess just if I can jump in, and I'm sorry to belabor this, but last thing on this, and kind of to Scott's point, so these things will be incorporated in the use Kevin's number 10,000 page PAL report, right? So do we have currently to help us form this report? Do we have landscape architects, urban planners, environmental engineers? Do we have people working on this report beyond civil engineers or people who can build bridges? Do we have people experts at the table doing this work for us as we put this report together?
Yes.
Yes, we do.
Yes.
Again, it's a very high level. Let me just reiterate that we're early on in this process, and this is in a year, you're not going to have a design ready to go. And this is a long process. And so even in the NEPA phase, there's an extensive impact analysis that will take into account, many of these concerns.
But to answer the bottom line question there is yes, we have all different disciplines engaged. Even at this PEL level, we're starting to look at different components of the, community connectivity and things like that. I mean, they've got some things that you will see in future meetings. So like Neil
Okay,
said,
thank you.
there's still a lot
Thank
of
you.
stuff to come.
I appreciate that. Thank you. And if you can, at some point, just share those firms with us as well. We'd like to be able to see who's working on the project.
Park. Fred wants me to meet him tomorrow. That stuff.
Okay. Thank you, everyone, for your comments during this section. I thought this was very productive. I'm going to move on from this section. We are going to get into those other transportation-related goals and objectives that incorporate those community and environmental concerns that we have identified, as the study team ourselves and through our coordination with, PAC members. I will say that these other transportation-related goals and objectives will be translated into measurable criteria that we can evaluate against these potential solutions that we develop eventually. We do want to find a solution that benefits the community to the most extent practicable in order to solve these transportation issues and also some of these other issues that are coming up through our discussions. So we have these other transportation-related goals and objectives. They are a desirable outcome of the Pneumic program. So, they aren't the primary purpose of the program. We have been receiving your input on, these goals and objectives. We have identified them through our outreach and, our stakeholder meetings and these meetings. These other transportation-related goals and objectives are considered as we evaluate these potential transportation solutions. Achieving any of these goals, are going to, either better support an alternative or show that an alternative may not benefit the community as much as we would like it to. So that is where, these other goals and objectives come into play. So when the program team set out with the goal of desiring these other identifying these other desirable outcomes of the program, we looked at Waterbury as a whole and how the transportation system impacts the city. As mentioned in this meeting many times, and as we've mentioned before in other previous meetings, we realized that the Mixed Master Interchange, I-84 and Route 8, it really does divide Waterbury into quadrants that separates the community and limits those pathways for interconnectivity. That may be a product of the interchange itself, but it's also a product of the topography and the river that goes right through the city, and that we really need to take all those aspects into consideration because it's not just about the transportation system as we've discussed. As we take a look at, the transportation system as we see it today, we do want to reimagine a reconstructed mixed master interchange, thinking about how we can better serve this community and the transportation system's users. And we want to reimagine this interchange through the lens of sustainability and equity, many of the things that PAC members have brought up today and in other meetings. These other transportation-related goals and objectives need to balance these transportation needs. It also needs to balance, those social, economic, and natural environmental values. As we look towards the future of the mixed master interchange, we continuously talk about enhancing connectivity in Waterbury and within Waterbury and what that means. So some of the other goals and objectives that we have identified is providing connections to, along, and over the Naugatuck River and the Naugatuck River Greenway near the highway. We want to improve the local roadway network associated with the mixed master for those intracity trips. So those trips that start in Waterbury and end in Waterbury. We want to enhance the mobility for bicyclists and pedestrians and improve the bicyclist and pedestrian safety around the interchange. We also want to make sure that we integrate this project with the ongoing City of Waterbury projects. Those projects include the water project, Waterbury's active transportation economic resurgence, the Complete Streets project, and the projects that are along Freight Street Business District and other districts within Waterbury. We also want to improve access to downtown Waterbury and those other key destinations that have been identified within Waterbury. And we want to reduce interchange complexity. We also want to support development opportunities within Waterbury. That means strengthening the role of surrounding neighborhoods as gateways to the city's central business district. We also want to support the City of Waterbury's goal of revitalizing that central business district through mixed-use development, such as the aforementioned Freight Street District redevelopment. We want to support modal interrelationships. What that means is supporting access to bus facilities and railroad station in downtown Waterbury. With this program, we also want to minimize, avoid, or mitigate potential program consequences to the human and natural environment. That includes historic and archaeological resources. This is to the extent practicable. Many of the concerns that have been highlighted today will be captured in this goal, which we will develop measurable criteria for as we screen and evaluate our potential solutions for the mixed master interchange. These are the program health studies guiding principles. These are what I mentioned that will influence the overall program. They're not listed in any particular order, and these guiding principles include the following. We want to maintain our accelerated program delivery. We want our whatever solution is found, we want it to be practicable in terms of cost and feasibility. We want to provide those context-sensitive design solutions in an aesthetically pleasing facility. We want to minimize the real, perceived, and visual barrier of the freeway system. We need to stay attentive to design and construction provisions to minimize community disruption. We want to make sure that whatever solution is found is that it's in harmony with the community and preserves environmental, scenic, aesthetic, historic, and natural resource values in the area. We want open public participation process with early communication and coordination throughout this health study. We also want to support the local, regional, and statewide transportation plans. And then finally, the completed program, we want it to be seen as an enduring community enhancement. And I'm going to stop here to take some time to go over any questions in this section.
Naomi,
Yes.
what does mitigate to the extent practicable mean? I mean, are we, when do we decide something is no longer practical to repair or fix or improve? I guess it's a cost thing, or what does that involve?
It would, I would say it involves a number of things. If a goal or a measure could be to make the Naugatuck River drinkable, I'm not sure if that's practicable for our study and our program. If there is an opportunity to, say, install water quality, basins or stormwater quality detention ponds, but we find out that, a lot of the soil that is in the area is just not conducive to constructing those items, it's unfortunately not practicable. Those are some of the things that we will be looking at and evaluating as, more information is developed and more items are seen as the study progresses. And if
Okay, thank you.
Okay, yep, great. So in this next section, I'm going to breeze through them pretty quickly. We've gone through this at our last meeting. This is just to go through the results of our January workshop last meeting. We really wanted to identify those needs and deficiencies, local issues, potential program priorities, and provide some more context for our preliminary purpose and need statement.
So Naomi.
Yes.
Oh, sorry, I don't have my video on there. Sorry about that. I just wanted to pause here because I just want to be cognizant of the time that's remaining, given what else we have to go through. We want to make sure we have enough time at the end here again for the entire PAC, everybody else's comments and concerns. So I'll ask you, I guess, in your team there, in terms of gauging, you think you can somehow summarize really quick, or do we want to stop here?
I was just going to suggest, Neil, maybe we stop here and pick this up at the beginning of the next meeting, and maybe we can jump ahead now to the questions and comments that came in earlier, so that we can get that in, so that everyone has an opportunity to hear, because I don't know if people are going to have to jump out at 2:30 if they have other commitments. So maybe we can jump to that slide, Naomi, and we'll just pick this stuff up right at the beginning of the next one. That's okay with everybody?
Yeah, and just quick suggestion or comment, is there potential maybe with the next meeting, we could sort of remove some of those introductory slides, being meeting number 5, and there's resources on the website, so we can save more time for discussions like this. We have been getting to the end of, going past meeting times and whatnot.
Yeah, absolutely. That into consideration will definitely truncate some of these more introductory slides. Definitely moving forward, since we've already met, this is our 4th time meeting, so there's no real need to belabor some of those aspects. So, ahead of this meeting, we were emailed a couple of questions. I'm going to allow Connecticut DOT to answer these questions, and they'll just come up on the screen as we go through them.
So I believe this document, Dave, you had mentioned, is on our website and available for review. What do we decide in terms of providing the link to this document? I think we can do that.
Yeah, so I think what we're going to do, Neil, is we will respond back to everyone with a list of, we can discuss these here, but we will respond back to the email, so everyone will see the responses, and we'll provide a link also to but it is on the website. So yes, you can review it, and if you want to provide us with comments, certainly feel free to do so.
So what are the early action, near-term, long-term projects that are within the Pneumic study area? So specific to that, we're still very early on, right? And so that's something that we're still being developed. We've identified some locations, but part of this process is to develop that universe of alternatives. And so we're not there yet in terms of, providing those. And then specific to the next questions, how are the PAC meetings related to each? Well, again, the PAC, the role of the PAC for the whole program is it's an advisory role, help us provide input, as you mentioned, based on some of the community concerns. Almost it's that collaboration and another way for our team to get information to the PAC, which can then be relayed to the community. But again, it's providing that input on that local aspect, as some of you have mentioned, in terms of what the PAC's role is. But again, we don't have all those projects yet identified, so still got a ways to go, I think, and you'll see that as we go through.
Yeah, Neil, this is Mark Nielsen again. I think part of what I see is, the rebuilding of the interchange is really a very long-term project. I mean, you talked about in I think the first PAC meeting, how, we're doing the ramp rehabilitation project now that's going to give us 25 years of life for that thing. And I think that's a hard time frame for a lot of people to get their sort of heads around that, this is way in the future. And I think, a lot of us, or myself anyhow, I shouldn't speak for anybody else, but I think, a lot of people are getting excited about the possibility of sort of the short-term, near-term things that we can sort of, fix under the umbrella of the Pneumic project. So I think, everybody can sort of say, yeah, okay, Mix Masters, long-term, there's a lot of, interest in looking at the short term, trying to really fix some of the local problems. So I think that's where this question is sort of coming from.
Right, and as we vet those and through our process, and even through our other agencies, and those will become, as we go through the PAC meetings, we will be bringing some of those to the PAC to probably get input on.
Can I ask a question about that, Mark? That was an interesting question, and so brings up the my question is, what are some of the short-term things that we could affect? So, like, for instance, I hate to beat a dead horse, but it seems like to put a few oil and trash separators could be a short-term thing. We don't have to wait till 2035, when the thing is finished, to see some very short-term but very impactful environmental quality improvements. So if you could maybe make some suggestions. It's not about making the Naugatuck River water drinkable. It's to minimize the impact on the pollutants that are running directly into it right this second. And from this storm, I can't imagine they'd be off the charts if you were to analyze what flowed into the Naugatuck River from this storm last night. So I understand the excitement of, and the confusion between long-term and short-term and what we could fix. We can't tomorrow, we can't have the river, Route 8 on the other side of the river. We can't change a ramp direction quickly, but there has to be short-term things. And do we in this process have a chance to correct some of these things?
So
Well, I
again, I think,
Go
go
ahead.
ahead, Scott.
No, I was gonna say, I think, most of the stuff, and we had talked about this before, Kevin, that a lot of the things that you're talking about incorporating would be in the long-term project, right? So it's, when we do rebuild the highway, all of those things will be part of the process, right? To, collect stormwater runoff and things like that, maybe differently than what's happening now. In terms of retrofitting what's out there now, I don't know if that's something that maybe the department could look at as a maintenance type project, but not as something necessarily as part of I don't think that's the type of early action that we were defining for this. We're looking more at early actions that would lead into better performance and enhancing the future build option later on. So, I think I had mentioned at one of the other meetings, we see a lot of the traffic now using the interchange, and that was one of the polls that Naomi put up, is how many people use the interchange to get from one side of the city to the other, because they don't want to drive on the city streets because they know they're going to hit some type of congestion or whatever, right? Maybe you got to go through 10 stoplights and you just don't want to do that. So you jump on one exit to get off the next. But if we could improve some of the intersections and some of the city grid to make it more desirable to go that way, then that gets some of the traffic off of the interchange, making the future build an easier scenario. So those are the kind of things that we'd be looking at. But again, I think you may be talking about two different things, right? If you're looking to retrofit the existing mix master with,
it could be transferred into long-term things, because some of these things, they actually exist. If you read Stormwater Magazine,
I understand what
you don't need retention ponds where there's no place for them. But a trash and oil excluder, how much, what's the complication in that?
One thing, that can come out of this program, out of this PEL program, are certainly could be recommendations. And some of those recommendations are not going to be all, department related. They could be recommendations that are for the city. They could be recommendations that are for, the PAC, in terms of what can come out of this program. So maybe that's, as Scott said, it's something that can get identified as, okay, is that something that maintenance can go out and address? So
I perfectly understand that, but let me illustrate something. In 15 minutes or 5 minutes, I had a meeting with the chief of staff of Neil O'Leary several years ago, and I went to every town on the Naugatuck River and suggested a pilot program, a trash excluder pilot program. Within 5 minutes, it was a no-brainer for the city of Waterbury, and they bought 15 and placed them. And you just place them in strategic places. I don't see the rocket science and the need to see this materialize in 20 or 30 years. I guess that's and it's not just on the city. They're going to do their part, but you at CDOT and the engineers here, there was never ever, it doesn't seem to be any attention to it. And I have not been pointed to any designs, these mitigating potential engineering features, like as simple like trash and oil excluder, or if there's a spill, what do? You just call hazmat, and they flush it down into the storm drains because they have no choice on the mix master, that is. So I see, it seems that I don't really understand the problem here. Maybe I'm just in the wrong church and sitting in the wrong pew as well. And that's where I guess I'm struggling here. Maybe I am, and if I am, I'd like to know early, so I don't bring these questions back to you and both bore you and take up everybody's time. I really, that's not my goal here. I need to be at work. I'm an independent contractor. I get paid. I don't get paid sitting here in this meeting. As a matter of fact, every meeting I go to, I don't get paid to. But so, you know, I'm trying to learn what can be done and what can't be done, I guess, is the operative question.
Well,
Kevin, I
hey,
do want,
oh, sorry.
go ahead.
No, so Kevin, we certainly appreciate you being here, and you're not in the wrong church. You're in the right one. You know, I want to reiterate again that, you know, this project is off on the horizon, right? Still,
Understood.
and we're a ways from, you know, getting there, putting a shovel in the ground. So we're still trying to define what we're going to do. And, you know, your concerns are valid, right? And so they will be part of the big picture when the design actually comes about, right? But it's still off in the distance a little bit.
Okay.
So, you know, it's not that, you know, it's not that you're in the wrong place or anything like that. No, you're in the right place. But I think we're still talking about two different things. You want to see stuff affected now, and this project isn't going to take place for a while. So, you know, it's just keeping that in mind, that these discussions are all to help us focus on the things that will need to be done when this project happens. Right.
Scott, if I may, I don't misunderstand. I totally understood that. That's not where my misunderstanding comes. It's just what can be done in the short term, because Mark Nielsen just brought up the long term and short term, and how it's easy for the public like myself, it gets confused or excited about a potential change and, you know, and connectivity between one neighborhood and another, or something like that. So that led me to that question way ahead of time. I understand this is very long term. I understand that you're in the process, but it did lead me to ask that question: what could be done in the short term? Because I don't know if it was you, but somebody said that you know, this is long term. We can't do any short term changes. I mean, this is, you know, it's already the construction's already going on right now. And this other stuff we're talking about is many, many years out in the future. So no, I understand that. I just got the impression that, you know, there could be no short-term immediate changes by our involvement in this process. So I get it. I understand. And that's why I meant the wrong church in the wrong church. I am in the wrong church. If we cannot do anything in the short term, I need to find another avenue. Whether it's the governor or the head of the CDOT, that I go and talk to and say, hey, listen, you know, can you stop the pollution or help mitigate the pollution into the Naugatuck River from the Mixmaster? And, you know, so. Sorry for taking too much time.
No, I think if, you know, you're absolutely right. Then if you're interested in some type of an interim fix, if you will, then, you know, that, as I said, that might be something that, you know, through our maintenance division, or, you know, we can certainly, we're there too, so we can certainly, you know, bring that up for discussion.
Right.
Thank you.
Thank you. I also want to, I sort of want to echo your concerns, Kevin. So the Connecticut Department of Transportation, they do have an MS4 program. So they have a stormwater quality management program in place. That has been ongoing since 2019. And so the department is, you know, subject to those goals and requirements of any stormwater discharge permit. And the department, aims to reduce the pollution discharge to the state's surface waters and wetlands. So that includes, the Naugatuck River. They have their own stormwater management plan that where they have to file for a permit, which is issued by the Connecticut Department of Energy and Environmental Protection, so DEEP, and that is under the authority of the National Pollutant Discharge Elimination System program. So that really, comes into play with your concerns about these stormwater discharges into the Naugatuck River. The Department of Transportation is considered, a non-traditional municipality, when we're talking about these stormwater programs. So they do have to look at, their systems a little bit differently, but they do have that stormwater management plan that you referenced, that where you're asking for those best management practices and other items that get incorporated into Connecticut DOT projects. They are outlined in that plan, and Connecticut DOT is required by law to abide by that plan. The DOT also has emails or even a call center number where for those of you who may be witnessing or seeing those illicit discharges that you're mentioning, either entering or leaving the DOT's stormwater system, so those drainage systems, you have an email that you can send an email out to or call so that you can express those concerns, give those details regarding those discharge locations, where they're located, what you observed, whether it be, an exact source, a color, an odor that you smell, anything of that. You can contact the DOT's MS4 office and their program, so that if there are these immediate opportunities that the DOT sees, that they can address them earlier than the Pneumic program. But I do want to mention this Pell study. We are aiming to end this Pell study by 2023. And so at the end of the Pell study, I forget who mentioned it, either Scott or Neil, but we will have a list of recommendations where we can, highlight opportunities for improvement, such as these stormwater improvements that you are identifying, that we can, write down, document, and hand over to this next, the next steps or in that process, which is in the NEPA phase, where we can actually identify, those items.
We're running along here, so let's get through the rest of the questions.
Yep.
I know some people are already starting to drop off, so.
Yeah.
Hey, sorry, could we just get a yes or no on the first question? I don't recall hearing that.
Which one, Eric? The
Analysis, yeah, that report, public comment.
Yes, so that is available on the website. We're going to get you a link. We did respond back to that. I don't know if you heard the.
Well, I guess the comment section of it, I downloaded it and have access to it, but comment, and is that a finalized report? Is there any public comments that can happen?
Well, we could certainly, I mean, if there's certain comments that you have and want to discuss, would be open to that.
So it sounds like it's finalized, like it's not, the drafting portion's over, it's a final document, and it's going to be a baseline moving forward.
That's the basis of the study that we started, right? But if there's something in there that I don't see why we couldn't, discuss it, if that's the case. As part of the Pell, important part of the Pell process is the documentation, and so that informs the NEPA process moving forward.
Yeah, I guess it was created before the PAC had its first meeting, so I was just wondering if we had a presentation on it. It just wasn't clear if you wanted feedback from us on it, or if this was like, hey, we already completed this, it's done. Here's our scope and like foundation.
Again, I think part of it is, part of our process with the PAC is to inform all the PAC members of what the team has started, has accomplished, and that's part of it is to inform you and the public of some of the reports. So again, I don't want to belabor it, but yeah, we can certainly discuss if there's certain comments and specific additions. I can't say here that it's going to be incorporated, but I think it would be a point of discussion.
Okay, thank you.
Mm-hmm. So I think we kind of covered purpose and need in terms of the mission statements, really a purpose and need, and the goals and objectives. You want to talk about the agenda in terms of, I think did we touch on that maybe before? And I think we can, as we prepare for the meetings, we can get an agenda out. Sometimes we are still, working on that agenda for the meeting, even up to, a week before. So, but we could certainly do it.
Naomi, I think you're sending that out with the invite, right?
Yes, I do include a one or two sentences of the material to be covered in the meeting, in the invite. So the agenda, a quasi agenda, is included in the invite when that gets sent out, and then we further refine it internally here as we further develop the presentation.
So in terms of, opening discussions at the beginning of each meeting, I think one of the things that would be a recommendation is, as questions and comments come up, during this PAC meeting and after, we can we'll address those at the beginning. But, as you can see, we've got a lot of information that we want to convey. And, again, we didn't finish today, so we want to make sure that we're mindful of everyone's time. So we want to get through our agenda in these meetings. So I think that's the best way to handle it. If that's something that's agreeable in terms of, we get questions up front that we can address at the beginning of the back meeting. Right, so in terms of the environmental impact statement, we're too early on in the process. We have, class of action has not been determined at this point, so we don't know what we're going to classify as. We still have to go through the universe of alternatives and screening before we even get to a point where we can determine what the proposed class of action is. So, at this point, you're looking at what, probably determining a class of action. I'm going to say at least another year, or possibly nine months, maybe 9 to 12 months before we even determine the class of action for the recommended range of the reasonable range of alternatives. PAC members be involved with the process for the public meeting. So this one, I think, we didn't understand the question completely. Obviously, we do want the PAC members part of that process in terms of attending the public meetings. We want the PAC to reach out to those other members of the community. That's an important part. Sometimes we can't reach everyone with our notices and
yeah, obviously the organizations that you're representing too, and certainly encourage people to come to the meetings. Certainly we would hope that, the PAC members would also attend the public meeting, as a member of the public, right? So is that the,
That was it.
the final one?
Yep.
Any other?
Yep, that was the last question. There were other slides which we will pick up at our next meeting. I'll send out more information about when that will be over the next couple of weeks. I did want to thank, everyone who was able to attend this meeting. I thought it was, a very good discussion. And I hope everyone's understanding of this process has, improved a little bit since the last time we've met, and will continue to improve. And we really want to maintain this collaborative space for, us, the PAC members and ourselves, and, maintain that two-way discussion between the community and the Department of Transportation. With that, I will, end the call. We'll reconvene in a couple more weeks, and I will send out additional information. If there are any additional comments or questions, please do not hesitate to reach out to myself or any other members of the study team and program leadership team, so that we can address them and make sure that we answer them to the best of our abilities. But thank you all for your participation. We all greatly appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you.
Thanks, everyone.
thanks to everyone.
Have a good weekend.
Thank you. Have a great weekend, everyone.
Bye, everyone.